Hi everyone, here's the Bookchemist once again. Last week I was reading The French Revolution by Christopher Hibbert, and one of the most interesting passages in Hibbert's account of the revolutionary decade in France is a passage where he quotes the diary of a young woman living in Paris at the time of the Terror. This young woman talks about her music lessons, talks about her walks around town, about the games she plays with the staff working around her upper middle class home, but there is really no hint in this account in her diary of any fear or unease or any tension at all, really. The point that Hibbert is trying to make by quoting this diary is that for many people living at the time, even though we think of the terror in France as a bloody time of great violence, for many people living back there, life was going on pretty much as normal, and they couldn't really perceive that anything so horrifying was happening all around them. This is exactly one of the many aspects of the Gilead regime that Margaret Atwood explores in The Testaments, the long-awaited, much-acclaimed sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, although I will argue in the course of this review that sequel is probably the wrong term for the novel. As most of us know, considering how successful The Handmaid's Tale has been in becoming part of our collective popular culture, Gilead is this oppressive Puritan theocracy, as it's described in the novel, that has taken over parts of the United States sometime in the 21st century, and which is based, this country is based on the subjugation of women. It's an oppressive, nearly de facto totalitarian regime. The Testaments explores Gilead and describes and builds this world through a variety of perspectives, most notably through three different perspectives, three different narrators, two of them telling their story from within Gilead, and one of them talking about Gilead as an outsider. One of the characters living in Gilead, Agnes, is fundamental to illustrating exactly that concept that I was mentioning at the beginning of the video. The idea that for all that it would be easy from the outside while reading the Testaments to see Gilead as an incredibly oppressive and inconceivable even horror and catastrophe, for many, if not most of the people actually living in it, it just feels like home, it just feels like normal life, and they are more concerned with their own individual difficulties and problems and small ambitions and dreams than they are with the well-being of society at large and the well-being of those who are oppressed within these societies. This is a fundamental point in a novel such as The Testaments, which serves a very powerful social function in a world such as today's world, but has it really ever been any different, where the rights of people, and especially of certain groups within society, are constantly under threat from people who exploit these threats as a way of reaching power. And the reason why this reflection is so vital is that it confronts us with two separate questions that are interlinked and both extremely important and worth considering at length. The first question is almost a cliche in dystopian fiction, but is still really relevant and really significant. And the question, very simply put, is: can we really say, me reading the novel and you other readers talking about it with me, can we really be certain that if we were living in Gilead, we would behave differently from all of the people who simply comply to the regime and follow their orders? It's not even a simple matter of courage, although that plays a part in it. It's just part of our basic nature as human beings, that we are influenced by the masses and by the forces around us in ways that are sometimes even hard to identify, which leads me to the second question that the book asks, which is, considering how unaware the people of Gilead are of the oppression they live in and the horrible way some of their citizens, all of their citizens, are treated, can we really be sure that ourselves, living in our contemporary, supposedly free and progressive societies, can we really be certain that we're not also complicit in horrors that would seem unforgivable to somebody else, if they were witnessing our story from a privileged perspective. And I think we can all agree that, for instance, when it comes to our reliance on fossil fuels and our reliance on practices that are wrecking the earth and the health of the planet, I think we would look monstrous, each one of us, to the eyes of an external observer. That's just one of the perspectives that someone can embrace after reading such a hard-hitting but stimulating novel such as The Testaments. Another very interesting point that's raised here is the question of hate. One of the characters, the character of Daisy, who looks at the regime from outside of it. She grows up and lives in Canada and obviously hates Gilead. She considers it a mass of fanatics who don't really deserve her pity or her consideration. The novel, at a few crucial moments, questions Daisy's hate and takes a step away from it. Because at the end of the day, her hate and the way she looks at people from Gilead as barely even human is part of the same dehumanizing process that allows the oppressive classes in Gilead to act so violently and so monstrously toward its own citizens, especially its women. It reminded me, The Testaments, in its courage, in the courage it had to tackle this very difficult concept and topic. It reminded me a lot of The Golden State by Lydia Kiesling, another fantastic novel. In this novel, the narrator at one point indulges, after a lot of patience, in a small invective against some far-right nut job, and she compares the pleasure that she gets out of it with the pleasure she gets out of mistreating her toddler when she throws a fit or misbehaves. It's the same type of nasty, evil feeling that comes from acting violently towards somebody who clearly doesn't understand you. Unsurprisingly, Daisy's own growth in the Testaments doesn't really come through some kind of violent vendetta fantasy, but it comes from getting in touch with people from Gilead, people who have perhaps a very different worldview and follow very different beliefs from her. And it comes from identifying the common ground that they share and the common good that they can all agree on as human beings, and that they can use to work together toward a better future. What about The Testaments as a story, as a novel? As I said, I'm not so sure that this is a sequel to The Handmaid's Tale. To me, it feels more like an expansion on The Handmaid's Tale, a way of looking at the same world anew from a very different set of perspectives. The Handmaid's Tale, for its very nature, feels like a very compact novel. The simple fact that it's narrated from one single character provides a more limited view on this very rich, gruesome reality and an alternate world. Testaments is much richer, provides more nuance on this world, as I said, a variety of perspectives. It feels less claustrophobic. And on top of being much more complex in its world building, it's also truly gripping. Especially in its second half, this is one of the most fast-paced novels I've read in quite a long time. I finished the entire book in 2 days, and I doubt that it would take you much longer than that, because of how brilliantly the plot is structured, and just because of how brilliant the whole text Atwood is at making it accelerate faster and faster as the various strands of the novel start aligning and the plot gains momentum toward the explosive finale. It reminded me very much of Hag's Seed, another recent Atwood novel that I liked very, very much, and another novel that combined a really hard-hitting and somewhat disturbing first half with a really carefully plotted second half that evolves beautifully toward a really satisfying conclusion. Testaments is also incredibly well written, and the main testament to this, the irony, is that it's also, for all of its horror and for all of its bleak terrible descriptions of the very darkest corners of the human soul, it also manages to be really, really funny. There's a couple of passages in here that are straight up hilarious, especially when it comes to the Owen's mottos, Penny's envy, per ardua cum estrus, and it manages to be truly quite funny without in any way compromising on its message or its atmosphere. Testaments is not in any way afraid of tackling some of the darker aspects of human psychology and of our behavior when we're immersed within society. And it does so in a progressive and constructive manner without ever shirking away from dealing with these horrible topics and without ever in any way looking away from the truth of human experience. In general, when it comes to dystopian fiction, I tend to prefer dystopias that are built around pleasure principles rather than horrifying and oppressive dystopias. Some of my favorite dystopian novels are, for example, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley or The Circle by Dave Eggers, because they talk about really horrible and nasty societies that are built around the idea that what they're doing is for the good of all citizens. They are offering their citizens something that they choose themselves as the way to greater happiness. The problem with the grimmer and more violent type of dystopia, of which I guess 1984 would be the key example, is that they sometimes feel even a little self-indulgent in their descriptions of governmental violence and oppression. It's not even their own fault, it's just a basic component of storytelling. When confronted with these types of plot, they almost inevitably feel a little bit too exaggerated and unlikely. They are really hard-hitting while you're immersed in them, but it's easy to dismiss them as exaggerated accounts and just the work of paranoid minds. As I said, it has nothing to do with fiction. Famously enough, at the end of World War II, General Eisenhower instructed the US Army to take a lot of pictures and document the reality of the Holocaust and of Nazi extermination camps, because he was aware of the fact that with time, people would grow skeptical about them. People would start to suspect that maybe these accounts were exaggerated. It's just human nature to try and dismiss these gruesome facts about reality rather than doing the hard work of confronting them. For all that, Testaments belongs very much to this type of dystopia, the very violent, very unforgiving. It still manages to avoid falling into that trap where it looks almost too gruesome to be believable. And that's because of two reasons. The first one is that the text itself is aware of this situation. Aunt Lydia, one of the narrators in the novel, is aware at several points in the novel that the violence of the Gilead regime won't last forever, that makeup is going to come back, that dancing is going to come back. This doesn't make the horror of Gilead any more ephemeral. If anything, it makes it more convincing that in spite of all this, such an oppressive and such an evil government could still manage to exist within a pocket of history. And at the same time, the other reason why the novel cannot really be accused to exaggerate its accounts is the fact that Atwood herself based everything that comes up in Handmaid's Tale and in Testaments on real life ideas, real life political agendas, on facts from reality and from recent history. She simply imagines what would happen if certain political and social ideas about, for instance, state control over reproductive rights, women's rights, etc., were taken to its extreme and were embraced by a political group bent on acquiring power. It probably goes without saying, but Testaments is an incredible novel. It's fantastic, it's gripping, and it will spur you to action and to look anew and question anew some of your behavior. It definitely did it with me. Some of your assumptions and conceptions about the societies we live in. It's a stimulating novel. It's a fantastic piece of fiction. It's so compelling. I could go on piling on adjectives on it, but it's just an incredible book, and I would recommend it to anybody. Great read. I probably liked it even more than Handmaid's Tale, for all that it's been a long time since I've read Handmaid's Tale. What did you think? Were you impressed with the novel, especially if you were Handmaid's Tale fans? Did you enjoy it, and was it everything you were hoping for? Did you find it superfluous? I'm really looking forward to discussing this one. Let me know in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching the review. Thank you to my patrons for sponsoring the YouTube channel, and thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring the video. Especially when facing disturbing fiction such as this, I find it really important to keep the mind engaged and stimulated through other creative venues. And one of these venues was a really interesting class I found on Skillshare recently called Demystifying Graphic Design: How Posters Work by the scholar and curator Ellen Lupton. This was a really fascinating and informative class that takes a close look at the poster collection in New York's Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, and it feels very much like taking a guided tour in the company of a really insightful expert. Ellen explained very clearly what makes a great poster, how our eyes are drawn toward them, and how this type of medium works. It's an informative and stimulating class, equally valuable if you're just curious on the topic or if you wish to try your hand at design yourself. It's just one example of the many similarly intriguing, stimulating, and fun classes of Skillshare, which is a beautiful community full of creators and creatives offering a variety of classes on a broad array of topics, all of them really stimulating, really relaxing and fun. You can take them at your own pace, and you can just engage your creativity and your passions in so many different ways. There is a link in the description box of this video, and the first 1,000 people to click on it will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so that you can start exploring your creativity today. Thank you again to Skillshare, and please do check their website out, it's awesome, and thank you all once more for watching. Bye everybody. Read the Testaments.